Hello and welcome back. Today we have a very interesting conundrum with a Cub Cadet riding mower. This is an lx1046. Let me take a second real quick to explain to you what happened in this machine. So Cub Cadet runs the headlight wiring harness alongside the engine here, and then it would clip over here, probably in this hole, and then go up to feed the headlights. Well, I don't know at what point Cub Cadet started doing this, but Cub has stopped switching the headlights. The headlights are now just always on as soon as you turn the machine on. So the headlight circuit always has power. Well, if you see this nice blub right there, that is melted plastic. The headlight wiring harness got up against the side of the exhaust right there and shorted power to ground. And instead of blowing the fuse, it melted the entire wiring harness all the way back to the engine. I don't know what went wrong exactly, but the fuse did not blow and the entire harness melted. So I tried to rebuild him one, but I do not have a schematic. Finding a schematic for this thing is about damn near impossible. And half the wires were burnt completely, so it was really hard to trace from point A to point B. So the customer went and got me another harness off another Cub Cadet, but I'm assuming in this case what has happened is the Cub Cadet that this harness is off of had the battery mounted somewhere in this general area behind the engine, because this is where the battery cable is now leading to. Also, there's some power going in weird places. If you see, I've cut this wire right here. Most Kawasaki's have a solenoid built into the starter, not unlike a modern car. And so this, I think, was supposed to feed the power side of the solenoid, which is why this wire was coming off of it. And it went up and fed a fuse. Where's the fuse? It went up and fed the fuse right here, which I think, see, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. This was obviously power going into the system, and so we're gonna clip that off down there, and we're now going to make this go to the battery. What we're gonna do is mount the the battery in this one is under the rear seat, or that's where it's supposed to be, as well as the starter solenoid. So what we're going to do is move the starter solenoid up here, find a nice happy spot for it somewhere, and mount it down here. We'll run this battery cable to the solenoid as starter power, and the other battery cable that comes from the back will go to the power side of the solenoid, and that is where we will hook this wire up, and now feeding it power. So the only thing I really can't tell, which I would have to assume just from my knowledge, pull this up here, this goes to the back. So I think this pair of yellow wires is for the seat switch, and this was for the reverse cutout, which just disconnecting it now bypasses the reverse cutout, because the customer did not want that. Most people don't, and most people don't back over small children or people when they're mowing, because most people do actually pay attention. So this customer was like, yeah, I don't want that hooked back up. So you see this bundle of wires right here, and I think what happened was there was probably a separate wiring harness for the engine side, and that plugged into this. In fact, I know there was, because this one had something similar at one point, but it was, this whole connector just literally just completely melted when it shorted. So I don't have the old connector. So we are going to basically wind up clipping this off and running the wires that we need from here to the engine. So if you're ever wiring one of these up, these two wires right here, let's see. Think. But now that I'm saying this out loud, where is my kill wire? That is interesting. Very interesting. Okay, so basically, these two right here go to our fuel shutoff solenoid, which is located under the carburetor. And this right here needs battery positive. And this is your charging system. So these two wires here are putting out AC electricity from the stator underneath the flywheel. This is your voltage rectifier, which basically means it takes voltage that's going every direction and puts it out in one direction. So this turns the AC voltage, the alternating current, into direct current, DC, which will charge the battery. So that needs a continuous battery connection, and somewhere on here, which may be one of these wires, I need to trace these down and make sure they are the same two going to that one. But one of these is going to be coil kill, which means when you ground that wire, the engine will shut off, and it's quite necessary. And now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm wondering where the crap that wire is. So we'll have to find that one. But anyway, in this harness right here, we have our power and we have our crank signal, which, like I said, I think the solenoid for the mower that this came off of was actually mounted to the starter. This is a much more affordable Kawasaki starter that uses the separate starter solenoid. Okay, so for those of you that don't understand the operation of a starter solenoid, basically this is a small switch that switches a big switch. If you give power and ground to these two small terminals, it's going to connect these larger two, okay? So basically you can use a small switch, aka your ignition switch, to switch this 200 amp load that goes to the starter, okay? So on the Kawasaki, I'm pretty sure this was made into the starter before, which is why the starter signal and the power takeoff for the rest of the electronics on the rider are both coming from that end of the harness over there. So we will get her figured out. Clip here, clip there, a little modification. But what's great about this harness is it did have all the right plug-in connectors, and for the most part they're all wired the right way. Plugged in up here to the hour meter. We plugged in down here to the ignition switch / reverse cutout module, which the reverse cutout module is no longer going to be used, but it's all still hooked up, so it could be reinstated very easily, and I don't have to rewire the ignition switch to make it happen. We have this connector here, which, quite honestly, I have no idea what the heck, it might have been an unused one. I can't even really figure out. It's got a ground, and then it's got this blue wire winds up basically going in with the PTO. So I don't know if this was some kind of additional safety cutout. This might be if it had manual blade engagement. I really don't know. But I don't think it's going to be used, and leaving it unhooked in this case seems to be like it's going to be our best bet. So we're about ready to have her. We got a few wires to run, and I'm going to have to figure out. I'm assuming ground must be through the engine. So this one might be a kill wire. And then this one's probably our power going to that, because we got to have power and ground at the carburetor. That essentially turns the gas flow on and off. It's called an anti-backfire solenoid. It's basically so that when you shut the rider off, it doesn't backfire, make a loud popping noise like a gunshot, because that tends to scare people. But yeah, I mean, there's the wiring on a rider is not very complicated. Let me show you this real quick. This might help somebody, because all of these are very similar. Okay, you see the letters here. You see this one right here that my thumb's on, that is labeled S. That is your starter out. Okay, well, let's start here. B is your battery, so that's your 12 volt in. M is your motor, so that's the ground that I was talking about. When you turn your key off, this terminal is going to be grounded, and that would ground the coil to stop the spark. S is going to go to your starter solenoid, and that'll be a 12 volt signal when you turn it to crank. And then we have accessory 2, accessory 1, ground, and I think L is lights. So I think L would be your headlights if you plugged them into this. So if you have some different, all these ignition switches, there's like 50 different ones you can have, all different layouts. Some have more terminals, some have less. But if in doubt, what you can do is get on Google and usually find a diagram that will tell you, B is for battery, M is for motor, it'll tell you what all the different letters mean. and then you can clean your ignition switch really good, and usually you will see these letters on there. And these plastic type like this, these things go bad all the time. As you see, it just pops together. It's not like the good old metal ones, but, you know, in the name of manufacturing. And then on this one, we have this module. It's a solid state module that controls this reverse cutout. And basically what it does is when it sees a signal on that ground, when it sees those two connected that I showed you a minute ago, it triggers a relay which cuts the blade out. And on some of them, it'll actually kill power to the mower, like to the motor, so it'll actually shut the whole thing down. Some of them just kick the blades out. I think that's how this one's wired up, but you know, if you're like the rest of us, you find that incredibly annoying. All you have to do is go back here. If I can get a good view without tripping over anything. Okay, somewhere in this general vicinity, you will see, because I've got it disconnected. Oh, you can actually barely see the pigtail right there. But that is the wire that hooked up to the ground. There's two wires that hook up there, and basically it connects those two wires when you go to put it in reverse. And if you don't have the cutout activated, it will just shut the blades off. So you disconnect that wire right there, and you're good to go. And since it's a modular deal here, you just disconnect this connector, which the wires have been yanked out of this one, but there should be wires coming out this other side. You just basically unplug these two connectors right here, and that system is effectively bypassed for this particular mower. Some of them may require grounding the wire. You'll just have to play with it and see, but usually they either want to be apart or connected, just like a seat switch. So it's not the hardest thing to bypass. But I think that's what this relay here is for. It goes in hand with this module. And also we have a fuse right here for the blade system. This relay does not trigger with the blade, so I'm thinking this is for the reverse cutout. So anyway, hopefully that makes a little bit more sense. And if anybody's working on a Cub Cadet, this might come in handy. If you're working on the wiring of another rider, maybe I've said something in here you'll find useful. These systems are very basic, you know. I mean, it's nowhere near as complicated as a car. The reverse cutout makes it a little bit more complicated, but most part, all riders just, you know, you got to have power coming into the switch. You got to have your 12 volt out when you go to crank it, going to the solenoid. The solenoid in itself, this is probably worth mentioning. Whoa, as I drop it. So the solenoid itself can be two different styles. You see here we have two terminals. Some of these will be a single terminal, in which case the ground for the small section here is actually through the housing of the solenoid. The reason you would have two terminals is if you send your 12 volt start signal through here and then control the ground with your safety switches, such as your brake switch. And that's usually what you'll find tied into that. Usually it will not let it start until you depress the brake pedal, and it connects the ground at that switch, and you get ground on this terminal. So on one of these, you're going to be looking for ground. You know, if you're looking at voltage and you go from the positive side of the battery to the wire that goes to one of these terminals, one of them you're going to see 12 volt, and one of them you're going to see ground. And if you don't see your ground, check all your safety switches. Okay. Some mowers keep the 12 volt from going to the solenoid, so then it just needs to be grounded internally, and they don't have to run a second ground wire. So that's less wiring. Also, usually the cutout will go through the blade engagement section, as you can see that yellow wire right there. So that's whenever you engage the blades, it opens the ground to the starter circuit. So if the blades are engaged, it cannot let it start. So that's usually the two that run through there. The seat switch controls that ground I was telling you to the engine, and basically it grounds that wire if you're not sitting on the seat, so that if you get up for any reason, the motor shuts off. You know, I like to keep that one intact. I've been flung off a rider before, and thankfully the seat switch did work, and it shut itself off, and thankfully I wasn't anywhere near the blades when I came off of it. But you know, I've been using ride lawnmowers for 25 years plus now, and I'd never had that happen before. But I went from zero turn back to a rider, hadn't used a rider in a while, and same hill, just all of a sudden caught it the right way, and I rolled that rider right over. So, you know, it could happen to anybody, and, you know, you need to be safe. Your brake switch and your seat switch are definitely worth keeping. The reverse cutout, I'll leave that one up to you. That is very silly, but, you know, it was put there for someone's good reason. You know, lots of children and people have been injured by careless drivers just backing up without paying attention to what's behind them. So always be mindful of what you're backing over, and, you know, stay safe, and hopefully you guys learned something in this video. If you have an electrical problem with your own rider and need some advice, feel free to ask in the comments. I try to check those once in a while because YouTube does not do a good job of notifying me when someone does comment on a video. So leave me a comment. Eventually I will see it, and I'll comment back and see if I can help you. But I have done 12 volt for over 20 years now, and have fixed a lot of electrical issues in riding lawnmowers that other people were unable to fix. So, you know, for some reason, this stuff I just makes sense to me. I'm not going to say I'm the best one out there, but I definitely know quite a bit about it. So, if you need help, please, you know, leave me a comment, and I will do what I can for you. So, thank you guys for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Check out my other videos. We got the cool Simplicity I did a while back. I showed a really neat Husqvarna the other day with a flip-up deck. And eventually we will get around to this Kubota when I have more time and money. So until then, it's going to continue to sit right there. So thank you guys for watching, and have a wonderful day.